Well, welcome to our monthly meeting of the Four Corners Federated Republican Women. It's my pleasure as First Vice President to introduce our speaker this month. Our speaker is Carla Sonntag. She is the president and founder of the New Mexico Business Coalition, which is a nonpartisan pro-business association that is known for bold action and extraordinary results. The Business Coalition is the state partner for the National Association of Manufacturing and the American Legislative Exchange Council, two powerful national organizations based in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. You got an email that has the info. I just want to tell you that I've known Carla for several years. We met at the legislature during a session, and she is a native New Mexican, married to her high school sweetheart, Larry, and they have two well-accomplished sons, Alan and Daniel. The title of her presentation is New Mexico's Economy, Where We Are and the Road Forward. So thank you very much, Carla, for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I wish I was there in person to hug you. I miss all of you so much. Farmington has always been, the whole Four Corners area, very near and dear to my heart. We watch what's going on up there very closely and are always engaged in trying to make it better for you, because I know you've got an inordinate number of challenges in your community, but a community of wonderful people. So it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can look at the slides as we go through them. All right. So we're going to talk about where New Mexico started in 2019 to give us a point of reference as we look at where we are today. And then we're going to talk about where we're going and hopefully how we're best going to get there. When the governor took office in 2019, she had a projected budget surplus of $2.3 billion. And that was going to be split between that current fiscal year of 2019 of $1.2 billion and the following year that we're currently in of $1.1 billion. There was a $3.1 billion change in spending. So first of all, you have the budget increase that we just talked about, 13.7% increase in the budget over that 2-year period of time, about $872 million, which is very significant, especially in light of the fact that our budget was just over $6 billion at the time. There was a lot of spending. The legislature, the governor went on a big spending spree. They spent $1.178 billion in 2019, $748 million in fiscal year 2020, and $300 million for fiscal year 2021. Now, when you look at this, none of the spending is related to the COVID shutdown. At the time these budgets were set, of course, we didn't know what was ahead regarding the pandemic. So now we have a budget of $7.2 billion. It's normal for budgets to increase, but this, as we talked about, was significant in a 2-year period of time to go up this high. When the pandemic hit, then we knew we had some problems because the entire economy was shut down. So when they came back into a special session in June of this year, they made approximately $400 million in cuts. Of course, simultaneously, we had money coming in from the federal government in the form of the CARES Act. And that was money for the state to spend as it needed. So if we look at the impacts on our economy that got us where we currently are, first we had the oil and gas industry constrict, and then COVID-19 hit. If you look at oil and gas industry, we know, just like with real estate, the oil and gas industry has been somewhat cyclical. We have up times and down times, boom times and bust times. And as the state legislature was looking at the budgets, we were there, the business coalition, saying, please don't increase it because we're looking at probably an upcoming down cycle in the oil and gas industry. We said that for 2 years. When we were in the fall of 2019, we knew there was already talk of the constriction. A lot of this, as you recall, had to do with worldwide events. There wasn't one particular thing that happened in New Mexico to cause it to constrict, but rather it was OPEC and other outside forces that was causing a glut of oil and gas, which put pressure on our producers to stop producing as much. When we went back into session in January of this year, again, not knowing about what was coming, we again talked about the fact that we shouldn't be increasing spending as much as they did. But as you saw, they did. So that's what we had to deal with. And then, of course, in the middle of March, COVID hits. It's probably been in the United States longer. We're seeing now that it was probably here back in December, but as of the middle of March is when it hit New Mexico hard and our economy was shut down. Because of that, we've had massive layoffs. We have lost hundreds of businesses permanently and thousands of jobs. It's going to be very hard to recover from that. You look at the sector breakdown of employment in New Mexico, it's kind of interesting. If you see that government is 23.6% of our employed workforce, and 16.7% is education, which really is still government employees, right? Some work for private industry or educational facilities, but still you're looking at about 40% of New Mexico's workforce is employed by government. The next largest section is trade, transportation, and utilities, and then professional and business services. Our oil and gas falls in that kind of orange slice, 8.3%, where it says mining and construction. That includes oil and gas. What's interesting, in January of 2019, we're looking at job losses, and the one that shows for government loss of 800 jobs, that is a very odd anomaly. We did a lot of analysis on that, and I think the best thing to describe it is just to say this is a snapshot in time on the entire scope of what we're looking at on these slides. But the government factor is really an odd one, and it's very, very difficult to get accurate and current information on where we are with government employees. But be that as it may, in January of 2019, this is when the administration came in, and the economy was doing some weird things as far as jobs were concerned. Leisure and hospitality was booming. The oil and gas industry was still very strong. We were losing a few jobs in a few other fields. Everything else was about steady. In your trade, transportation, and utilities, that's wholesale, retail, warehousing, and then of course the utility sector. In January of this year, again, you kind of have to not be concerned about that government number, because we know as we went forward, from the time the administration came in January of 2019 to January of 2020, we had added at least 600 jobs in government. This loss, I can't explain what they do with those numbers, but some of what they do is a difference in the accounting, and they don't track it the same for government as they do for the other industries. But mining was up, everything else was kind of holding its own. You could see that education was down a little bit. Everything else is just kind of hanging on. Then COVID hits, and we look at where we are today. This is really scary. There is no positive job growth. It's all losses. So when we hear that some industries are doing well, not so much. There's been massive job losses. Leisure and hospitality, of course, is the leading loss in the state. We've had hundreds of restaurants go out of business and all the jobs that were associated with that. But it's not just restaurants that were hurt. We have seen across the board businesses going down. We just got notice of the theaters. You have one in your area that's going to be on a hiatus. I hope that they're coming back, but we don't know. We don't know how long this will go, and we don't know how long these employers and business owners can keep going, how long they can sustain what they have. So it's a scary situation that we're in right now. We're not seeing any sign of movement. Now, as the COVID numbers are going up for various reasons, there is more pressure on what are we going to do with the economy. State unemployment. When we look at the numbers in our state, March of 2020, we had about 9,600 people receiving unemployment benefits. Total unemployment rate of about 4.8%. That percentage and the number receiving unemployment don't necessarily correspond. And the reason for that is because you have people that are timed out on unemployment benefits. You have people that have just left the workforce and are no longer looking for work. But those are two indicators of where we were in March prior to the shutdown. Fast forward to September, which is the latest numbers we had that we could find available. We have 123,000 New Mexicans receiving unemployment benefits, about 9.4% unemployed in our state. You notice that's almost 13 times the rate that we had in March. When you look at the US, in January of 2020, we had 3.6% unemployment, which is pretty incredible. It's the lowest that we could find in the history of the US. There were some reports that there may have been a lower time back in the 50s, but I couldn't verify that that made any sense. In April, after the shutdowns, there was an all-time high of 14.7% unemployment in the United States. Currently, that's been cut almost in half at 7.9%. What's really, really critical is what is happening with unemployment. If we look back a few years ago when we came out of the Great Recession, New Mexico had done a rewrite of its unemployment insurance law, and it was brutal on businesses coming back from the Great Recession. They're trying to get going again, they're hiring more employees, and their rates for unemployment insurance had gone through the roof. That in and of itself was the final straw for some businesses. One of the most notable was Kurt's Camera Corral, who had been in New Mexico for generations. When they got hit with the new rates, they called us and they said, we're done. We're closing. We can't do this anymore. So I didn't want to see businesses go through that again. And we had asked the governor, as soon as she shut down the state, within 6 days, to hold business owners harmless on what was going to happen to the unemployment rate. I started talking to legislators on both sides of the aisle, trying to figure out how can we fix this so that we don't drive employers, business owners out of business at the time we're starting to come back from COVID. Again, we have no idea when that's going to be, but we didn't want to add more pressure to them. So when we were getting ready to go into the special session, several legislators from both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, had called and asked me if I would help draft the legislation that would fix the problem. I was on the original commission with Governor Martinez that drafted that original law that was so tough on people, so I knew what the problem was. And so here's what we did. The law that was passed during the special session, and it became part of Senate Bill 3, it omits the data from March 1st of this year through June of next year. And the reason that we did that is because I knew at the time we wanted to take out all of the layoffs that occurred and the job terminations so that employers weren't going to be held accountable for that. We also knew that this was going to go on for a while. We weren't going to flip a switch, even when the economy starts opening, and think that we weren't going to have further hiccups and problems with employment. So all of that data is supposed to be eliminated from the calculation for an employer's experience history, their excess claims premiums, and excess claims rates. The other thing that it did was it took the reserve factor. This factor can go up to a total of 4%, and that's where a lot of the pain comes in. That factor is what is used to replenish the fund and to do it rather quickly, but to the point where it can cause rates to go up to close to 5%. So we ask that that be frozen in time using the 2019 factor through June of next year. We knew at the time that New Mexico was running low on its unemployment reserves to pay benefits. We understood that. We also saw when money was coming in from the federal government to other states, there were some governors who rightly decided to take part of that money and to shore up the unemployment fund. That didn't happen in New Mexico, but it was a possibility that money could have been used for that purpose. So September 8th of this year, the fund was depleted. We were out of money to continue paying benefits. On the 20th of September, the state borrowed $35 million from the feds. That money is supposed to be interest-free, but it does have to be repaid. Now, we know right now that the Secretary of Workforce Solutions is currently working to undo what we did during the special session. He's either going to try to reverse that so that employers coming back and rehiring are going to be faced with these higher rates, or the other thing that he may do is increase the cap on the amount that this money is paid. Right now, employers pay unemployment insurance up to about $28,000 of an employee's salary. Employees do not contribute to this fund at all. it's strictly from the employer. So he may try to increase that cap. To what extent, we don't know. We do know that he is working with some other business groups like ACI and others. So that is something we're going to be watching very closely. What really needs to occur is to let businesses operate again. If they're able to operate and they start bringing in revenue, they will start hiring employees. As they hire, even with these rates frozen in time, they will start contributing more to the fund. We can work this out. We should have shored it up with the CARES Fund money, but since that didn't happen, we do not have to see this fund repaid to the feds immediately at the expense of more businesses in our state. So let's talk about some brighter news. On October 1st, the revenue estimates were that we would have $6.8 to $7.6 billion. That would cover our budgetary needs for the most part. It looks like we could also have cash reserves of $500 million. So the reason this is really good news is consumer spending was greater than expected. People were staying home and they were doing a lot more shopping online, which increased the tax because if you recall, we put a tax on internet sales. And so that revenue has been coming in at a greater rate than anticipated. So hopefully when we go back into session in January, we may not be in as bad a shape as we thought we could be. More good news. And I think this is pretty phenomenal. On October 5th, the U.S. Department of Energy Deputy Secretary Menzies came to New Mexico, and we did a roundtable with the New Mexico Business Coalition. We had 10 people attend, including 2 from your community. We had Ryan Davis, who's with Marion Oil and Gas, and also president of IPA&M. And we had John Byram from PESCO. So out of 10 people attending, we had 2 from the Four Corners area. What the secretary talked about was the fact that the US is now finally energy independent. This is something that our president was striving to do from the beginning, and that goal has been met. And that is huge for our country. He also talked about, as he released a new report, New Mexico is the 3rd largest producer now in the US. That is phenomenal news for us. We're not producing where we were. We are still a big producer of oil and gas. There are challenges ahead. We saw in April that the US energy use was the lowest in 30 years. It's coming back a little bit as we see travel increase and the economy moving a little bit, but yet we're being pulled back again as we have this surge in COVID cases. And so there are some states that are locking down again, ours that never opened up. And so we're going to continue to have that challenge for a while. Oil, if you remember, went negative for a while. Now it's about $40 a barrel. That varies a lot. It's been trending up, which is a good thing. But with these other challenges that we've talked about, it doesn't mean that we're headed back into a boom anytime soon. The other thing that's going to be difficult, as I'm sure you're aware of, is the state is moving forward on new methane rules. That is going to be a challenge for a lot of producers. There are some that are not concerned about that. The larger producers have found technology and a way to deal with this. It's the smaller producers that we're concerned about. We want to find a way in the methane rules for fairness. We understand the state is going to move forward with this, but we hope that we can find a way that it doesn't put additional pressure on our oil and gas industry to the extent that it again impacts production. So where are we going? Well, we have the Energy Transition Act, the ETA, that was passed. Some people call that New Mexico's Green New Deal. This is part of a bigger plan by the governor to make New Mexico like California. I don't know how you feel about that, but to me it's a little bit disarming because California is not doing well. I was on a conference call a couple of months ago when some of the state legislators were talking about how we move forward with the ETA. And they said, you know, we're not going to have too much of a problem if we need to buy more renewable energy to comply with the ETA requirements of being carbon free. We can simply go to the market and buy power from California. Really? California can't even produce the power that they need, and we're going to go use California as a backup plan? Kind of incredible to me. You know the challenges going on with the San Juan generating station. Hundreds of jobs could be lost, or we might have the carbon capture to keep it alive. That continues to play out. There are forces in the state government that do not want the carbon capture to go forward because that does not fit with their plan of the ETA and being carbon free. The good news on that is that the federal government does support that, and Secretary Menzies spoke about that when he was here. They are very supportive and are doing what they can to see this project for carbon capture move forward. That would save hundreds of jobs in your community and keep people working at the mine as well. So more about where we're going, of course, is learning to live with COVID. When I say live with COVID, I say that because I have not seen any evidence that this is going away. I think, like you do, it is serious. We need to take it seriously, and we need to do our part in mitigating the spread. We also need to get back to safely living our lives. The shutdown has had a big impact on families beyond jobs. We've talked about the job impact, but we're also looking at people's physical health, not being able to take care of things the way they should, with cancer, heart disease, diabetes. These are life-threatening situations that are going to go on beyond the time when we get COVID, we hope, under control. So we've got to be thinking about that as we move forward. The state, of course, is asking for more stimulus money. Now we've got debt to the federal government because of our unemployment. And we see an issue sometimes with the state and the federal government sometimes picking winners and losers. That comes in the form of funds that are being provided to certain businesses, which is fine if there is payback, meaning at least that business is producing what it said it would produce. We know what's happening with real estate right now. There's been a moratorium on evictions, but even so, the rent that is due is only accumulating. The debt is not being forgiven. So at some point, if a business or an individual is renting a premise that they have been given time to not pay that rent, that may help them in the short run. It doesn't forgive the debt in the long run, and they're still going to have to figure out how to pay that money back. One of the things that is most concerning to me is taxes. There are a lot of legislators working very hard right now to increase our taxes. It's not a matter of if they will, it's which ones and how much. So that is something that we've got to be cognizant about as we move forward. What we need to do, and it is more critical than ever, we need to get organized. We need to build coalitions like the progressives do. That is what is holding us back and holding us down. We've got to come together. We need to be heard. We have been silent for too long. I think you, like me, have had our fill of policies that don't work in this state. There's two things that need to happen. We need new decision makers and we need new policy. But it's going to come from us. Those of us out here working with elected officials to find policy that works, like the unemployment insurance fix that we had, and holding them off from taking that back. I want to thank you for your time today. The New Mexico Business Coalition is looking to build coalitions. We have been working with your group and others in your area for a long time. If you are interested in being a captain for us and helping us more specifically in building out those coalitions, we would love to hear from you. Thank you again for your time, and God bless you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Carla, very much. That was really interesting. I do have a couple of questions that have come up, if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes to answer these. One of the first questions was on the revenue estimates when they were so high, the tax on internet sales, you said, is that a new tax or is that just charging gross receipts tax on anything sold on the internet?
Well, it's not a new tax, it is gross receipts tax on internet sales, but that is new because we were not doing that before.
Right, which we should have been forever doing that. It just made sense. In that way, it was competitive with local retail. The other question I have for you is, could you possibly send to us the sources that you use to come up with these numbers? I know a lot of people would like to look further into some of this information, and I know you pull from so many different places that it would be really handy if we could have that, and then we can just send it out to the membership. And if they have a particular area that they're interested in, they'll know at least where to start looking.
Yes, absolutely. And then if you need to contact us for additional information, I'm available anytime. Would love to help you. It was quite a project pulling these numbers together because they're not always easy to find, especially with our state.
Right. I know the government doesn't make it easy to find anything.
Right.
So anyway, well, all right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to do this for us. And we will hopefully see you in person sometime soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much, and God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.